You have also done a lot for the third world, looking at your Bangladesh concert.
Well, really that happened because of my friendship with Ravi Shankar. He, I think that was 1971, he told me that this situation was happening in Bangladesh and that he was going to do a concert to try and raise some money, but the concerts that he does, he can't really make that amount of money, and he was saying, maybe you've got some ideas, maybe you could help give me some ideas how I could do a show to make maybe $25,000. So I just, the more I read about it, the more I became involved with it. So I said, okay, I'll come on the show as well. And then I started to organize it because I thought, if we're going to do it, let's do it big. And let's not make 25,000, let's make $5 million.
Thank you all for coming here. As you all know, it's a special benefit concert. We've got a good show lined up, I hope so anyway.
In the summer of 1971, New York City became the stage for one of the most singular moments in the history of popular music. For a few hours, music and humanitarian urgency seemed to occupy the same space, placing the audience at the center of a historic crossroads that was difficult to define in real time. That event would come to be remembered as the Concert for Bangladesh. Over the years, it would be hailed as the first great modern benefit concert, an unrepeatable gathering of musicians such as George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Ravi Shankar, Ringo Starr, Billy Preston, Leon Russell, Eric Clapton, and others. An event that seemed to prove that music could change the world. But the reality was far more complex. The Concert for Bangladesh was born not only out of compassion, but also out of a moment of rupture. The Beatles no longer existed. John Lennon and Paul McCartney were trading insults in the press. In that moment of collapse, the so-called quiet Beatle spoke louder than ever. Not through words, but through action. While his former bandmates argued in public, George Harrison stepped forward, organizing 2 massive benefit concerts and transforming the aftermath of a breakup into a response to a global humanitarian crisis. In early 1971, the territory, then known as East Pakistan, was on the brink of collapse. In the midst of its war for independence, the region was gripped by a devastating combination of political violence, military repression, and humanitarian crisis. Millions of people fled toward India, while entire villages were left trapped between armed conflict and international neglect. The situation was already critical, even before the full outbreak of war. Just a few months earlier, in November 1970, a cyclone had devastated the coastal region, triggering one of the deadliest natural disasters of the 20th century. Flooding and torrential rains followed, compounding the structural fragility of an impoverished territory and pushing the Bengali population to the edge. By the spring of 1971, the disaster was total. Reports circulating in the international press began to describe figures that were difficult to comprehend. Hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced, and a refugee population that, upon reaching cities like Kolkata, faced new threats such as starvation and diseases like cholera. The crisis was no longer merely political or military. It was profoundly human.
All that was very disturbing for me, and I was thinking of doing something to raise money to be helping these refugees. That was the main object. George came to Los Angeles and he saw my anguish.
In the months that followed, as both men crossed paths on different musical projects between London and Los Angeles, George Harrison followed closely the news Ravi Shankar sent his way. One of them, published in the Sunday Times, laid bare the atrocities committed against the Bengali population. By then, Shankar was no longer asking for attention. He was asking for help. And Harrison understood that private outrage was no longer enough.
He told me that this situation was happening in Bangladesh and that he was going to do a concert to try and raise some money, but the concerts that he does, he can't really make that amount of money, and he was saying, maybe you've got some ideas, maybe you could help give me some ideas how I could do a show to make maybe $25,000, something which is much more than he could normally make in one concert. And then he gave me a lot of information about the war, and I read a lot about it, and once I got to understand what was happening, because what happened, there was more people killed, murdered in Bangladesh than in the Second World War, and not many people knew about it. So the more I read about it, the more I became involved with it. So I said, okay, I'll come on the show as well. And then I started to organize it, because I thought, if we're going to do it, let's do it big. And let's not make 25,000, let's make $5 million.
Harrison realized that if he was going to help, he had to do it with every tool at his disposal: his network of contacts, his global visibility, and the creative infrastructure he still controlled through Apple Corp. Within days, what was initially conceived as a modest event transformed into an ambitious fusion of Indian music and Western rock, envisioned for the most symbolic stage possible, Madison Square Garden. From that moment on, Harrison began to imagine a lineup that reflected both friendship and cultural weight. As Chris O'Dell recalls, barely hanging up the phone with Ravi Shankar, Harrison began enthusiastically throwing out names like Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, Billy Preston, Klaus Voormann, Jim Keltner, Badfinger, and even John Lennon and Bob Dylan.
I told George I was coming when he was putting it together, and I was in Spain actually, and I remember it very clearly, and he was sort of backing off from making it a Beatle thing. I said, well, I'm coming anyway.
George Harrison took on the roles of organizer, recruiter, and host, while Chris O'Dell coordinated phone calls from the house the Harrisons were renting in Nichols Canyon. George personally handled the most delicate negotiations, especially one, convincing Bob Dylan to take part. Nearly all of the invited musicians accepted without hesitation. Even a chance encounter with Memphis musician Don Nix ended with him joining the project as the organizer of a backing choir. An Indian astrologer suggested that early August was an auspicious time for the event, and coincidence sealed the deal. August 1st, 1971, was the only date Madison Square Garden had available on such short notice. At the same time, Harrison began working on the musical and symbolic core of the project. In early July, he recorded the song Bangladesh in Los Angeles, produced alongside Phil Spector. The track distilled the emotional origin of the concert, the image of a friend asking for help before his country disappeared. That line became the human axis of the entire initiative, something that, decades later, even the United Nations would recognize as the project's moral heart. That same month, Harrison also produced a benefit EP by Ravi Shankar, Joy Bangla, featuring musicians directly connected to the Bangladesh region. Both that record and Harrison's single directed all profits to an emergency fund administered by UNICEF. Meanwhile, the concert announcement appeared almost discreetly via a small notice in the New York Times. Even so, tickets sold out in record time, forcing the addition of a second show. By the time rehearsals began in New York, the core band was already set. Billy Preston on keyboards, Badfinger on acoustic guitars, Klaus Voormann and Jim Keltner forming the rhythm section, and Jim Horn leading the horn section. Leon Russell joined on the condition that he could bring part of his own band. Eric Clapton, despite a severe heroin addiction, insisted on participating, a decision that surprised many, but one Harrison supported to the very end. Among the Beatles, the situation was uneven. Ringo Starr never hesitated and flew in from Spain, interrupting the filming of a movie to be there. John Lennon, on the other hand, withdrew from the project after personal disagreements involving Yoko Ono, leaving New York just days before the concert. Paul McCartney declined the invitation from the outset, arguing that the legal and emotional wounds left by the breakup of the Beatles made his participation impossible.
Yes, I was invited on it, yes. But for me, I mean, it's a long story, all that, because the thing is, like I say, I mean, for me, the only thing is, if I'd gone there, I know for certain, I may be crazy to think it, but I know for certain that it would have been played up as, hey, the Beatles are back together again. You know, it may have only been for one night, but when in fact the truth is it's not. It's ended. It has definitely ended, you know.
And with that, Harrison's hope of reuniting the Beatles, for the cause, not for a reunion, was gone. But urgency would not stop for the Beatles, or for anyone, and George pressed on with his own. The schedule was absurd. less than 5 weeks to put everything together. And yet, the sense of expectation was historic, because there was something deeply symbolic about seeing George as the leader, not as the quiet Beatle, but as the one stepping forward, taking responsibility. For him, that too was something entirely new. The concert rehearsals were as improvised as the idea itself was ambitious. The Harrisons set up base at a New York hotel and began rehearsing on July 26 in small studios with incomplete lineups that changed day by day. George Harrison even went so far as to sketch out a possible set list before the band was fully assembled. For several days, rehearsals happened in fragments. Some musicians showed up, others didn't, and it wasn't until the night before the concert that anything resembling a full run-through took place, inside Madison Square Garden, combined with the soundcheck. Meanwhile, logistics and tension continued to build. Harrison and Ravi Shankar held a press conference to announce the concerts, with George visibly nervous at the prospect of stepping onto a stage alone for the first time.
Ravi came to me and he said if he was to do a concert, maybe play to so many thousand people, but to the size of the problem, the money, the funds that would be made would just be so small. So that's where I came along. I can generate money by doing concerts and by making records.
George, how much money do you hope to get from this?
Well, it depends really. Maybe through the concert we could estimate maybe about how much? Maybe 250,000 from the concert, but if we record the concert and film the concert, then maybe that would be a greater way of making the money. You know, a record could possibly sell 1 million, 2 million.
The single, Bangladesh, was released that same week, and the musicians began arriving gradually. Ringo Starr, Leon Russell, and the backing vocalists were integrated at the last possible moment, while the participation of Eric Clapton and Bob Dylan remained uncertain until the very end. Clapton arrived weakened by withdrawal, and Dylan hesitated until the final hours about whether he wanted to perform at an event of such magnitude. Even so, the technical crew came together in time. Sound, lighting, recording, and filming, and the concert would hold, almost miraculously, on a fragile balance of urgency, friendship, and creative chaos. Ready or not, it was time to begin.
Thank you. First part of the concert is going to be an Indian music section. The Indian music's a little bit more serious than our music, and I appreciate if you could try and settle down and get into the Indian music section. So let me introduce on sitar Ravi Shankar and the master of Sarod, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sarod. Sure you all know Ravi's tabla player, Alaraka. And this evening the drone instrument, the tambura, is being played by Kamala. So I hope you enjoy the concert. Thank you.
The concert opened with Indian music. George Harrison wanted the event to avoid feeling like rock stars saving the world, and instead serve as a reminder that the place for which money was being raised had its own culture, beauty, and history. Part of the audience did not understand the tuning ritual and reacted poorly, but Ravi Shankar turned the moment around with elegance. And then, when the performance finally began, the concert changed temperature. It was no longer just an event. It became a conversation between worlds. Then came the leap, from the classical to the electric. Harrison's return to the stage was met with a thunderous ovation, backed by an expansive band that included Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, and Billy Preston. Harrison launched the western portion of the concert with a force that surprised even those who knew him well. His own songs and Beatles material followed one another with uncommon energy, reinforced by a dense, almost orchestral sound.
Everybody was just excited and thrilled that it went so well. Everybody had a good time with each other. There was no egos.
The concert moved forward by alternating collective moments with individual spotlights. Billy Preston and Ringo Starr enjoyed especially celebrated turns, and one of the night's highest points arrived with an intense version of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, in which Harrison and Clapton traded guitar solos that would become one of the most enduring images of the event. The mood shifted when Harrison picked up an acoustic guitar to perform Here Comes the Sun live for the first time, offering a moment of intimacy within a massive spectacle. That atmosphere was unexpectedly broken when Harrison looked down at the set list and saw a name written there, followed by a question mark.
Dylan was a no-show up until the last minute. I had to go down to his apartment and literally get him.
Shortly afterward, Bob Dylan appeared on stage. For many in attendance, that moment was the true climax of the concert. With minimal accompaniment, Dylan performed 5 emblematic songs from the 1960s, provoking a mixture of awe and reverence that came to define the spirit of the day.
I remember the feeling at that moment. Just seeing the three of those guys up on the stage together was really tremendous. Knowing you were at the Garden and all these people were watching Dylan for the first time, maybe ever.
The highlight was Bob Dylan getting up on stage, because we all loved Bob.
The closing reunited Harrison with the full band for a final stretch that included My Sweet Lord and culminated with Bangladesh, the song written specifically for the cause. With it, the concert returned to its original purpose, reminding the audience that beyond the constellation of stars, the music was there to focus the world's attention on a real and urgent tragedy. The afternoon concert had come to an end.
Interestingly enough, by the time of the evening show, there was a surprising amount of word of mouth that had already got out from the matinee or from the afternoon show.
We pulled the first one off. Everybody said, hey, it was great, it was great, it was great. So, no problem, the second show.
After the first afternoon show, Harrison appeared visibly satisfied with what had taken place, as did Dylan, who accompanied him back to his hotel. The two discussed possible adjustments for the evening performance, set to begin just a few hours later. It was not about correcting mistakes, but about fine-tuning a moment that already felt unrepeatable. The second concert featured slight changes in song order and selection. Harrison reorganized his opening set, moving My Sweet Lord earlier and dropping some of the afternoon songs in order to close more powerfully. After Dylan's appearance, the concert moved directly toward a more focused and emotional finale, ending with Something and featuring an especially intense rendition of Bangladesh as an encore. Dylan also adjusted his set, swapping songs and adding Mr. Tambourine Man, which was met with enthusiasm. Over time, the evening concert would come to be regarded by many as superior to the afternoon performance. Even so, it was not without tension. Parts of the audience once again showed impatience during the Indian music opening, and technical issues, such as a microphone failure, affected the perception of that section. Despite this, the overall atmosphere was more solid and concentrated, as if both musicians and audience better understood what was at stake. During the western portion of the show, Harrison appeared more confident and vocally stronger. The sound was more polished, and moments like, "That's the way God planned it," turned into genuine bursts of energy, especially when Billy Preston stepped away from his keyboard to roam the stage, briefly stealing the spotlight.
And the great thing I remember about that moment was that Leon actually had the nerve to get up there with a bass guitar and try to follow him.
So he got up there to play by himself, and then he called Ringo up to play tambourine, then he called George up to play guitar, then he called me to play bass.
When Leon Russell played for Bob Dylan, you could see, oh, there's my bass guitar. And it was the psychedelic times, and I started painting my bass guitar. You can see this is the Klaus Vormann bass with a sun and lots of flames and stuff.
Yeah, Klaus will paint anything that's around.
Dylan's appearance once again became the emotional breaking point of the night. His presence generated the same amazement as in the afternoon, but now with a sense of triumph. As he closed his set, Dylan raised both arms in victory, fully aware that he had just completed one of the most significant returns of his career. Harrison returned to the stage to introduce the band and bring the concert to its definitive climax with a particularly emotional performance of Something. After 2 sold-out concerts, the musicians and collaborators gathered for a private celebration. The mood was one of euphoria and exhaustion. Dylan, visibly moved, embraced Harrison and joked that they should have done a third show. Still, as would be the cause for Harrison himself, the experience did not mark an immediate return to the stage for Dylan, but rather an extraordinary pause within a career still in transition. The post-concert party extended the night beyond the stage. George Harrison and Billy Preston performed informally, turning the celebration into one last unplanned set. At some point, a roaring drunk Phil Spector took over, delivering what witnesses described as a unique and barely recognizable version of "Da Do Ron Ron." The evening finally came to an end in the early hours of the morning, when Keith Moon, true to form, began smashing a drum kit that did not even belong to him, but to Badfinger's Mike Gibbons. After hours of music, chaos, and release, the concert for Bangladesh concluded not with a speech or a curtain call, but in sheer rock and roll excess, an exhausted celebration marking the end of an unprecedented night.
The highlight was Bob Dylan getting up on stage, because we all loved Bob.
Mission accomplished, everybody was really happy to be a part of it.
If I want to just take the overall impression, it was a good day out.
It was a miracle, really.
These things will always be remembered as times that we could be proud of being musicians. We actually just weren't thinking of ourselves for 5 minutes. We were doing something for a bigger issue. And we need that,
The musicians were great. They completely put down their own egos, because the whole vibe of that concert was that it was something bigger than a lot of us.
In the days following the concert for Bangladesh, the public narrative was almost unanimous. It had been a triumph. The press described the event as peaceful, historic, even redemptive. Bob Dylan's appearance alongside 2 former Beatles caused a genuine cultural shock, and the praise directed at George Harrison was overwhelming. For many critics, the concert represented a brief but intense reemergence of the best spirit of the 1960s: idealism, community, and music placed in service of something greater than itself. Musically, the impact was immediate and profound. Dylan's songs took on a new resonance within the political climate of the early 1970s. Ravi Shankar was recognized as the project's moral conscience, and the collective performance was seen as proof that rock and roll could still matter. It did not take long for the concert album and film to cement that perception. The record ultimately won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, an unprecedented recognition for a benefit project and an institutional confirmation of the event's artistic magnitude. But as the legend solidified, reality began to complicate matters. What had been conceived as an urgent response to a humanitarian catastrophe ran headfirst into systems that were neither prepared nor interested in moving quickly. Tax issues, administrative errors, and poorly made decisions caused much of the money to be held up for years. The concert had not been properly registered as a charitable event before it took place, leading U.S. tax authorities to freeze the funds in escrow accounts. The situation grew even murkier when accusations began circulating about the handling of the money, pointing towards Harrison's business circle and his then manager Alan Klein. Part of the funds remained frozen for nearly a decade, and although millions of dollars did eventually reach Bangladeshi refugees through UNICEF, the process was slow, frustrating, and deeply draining. For Harrison, the cost of acting quickly and in good faith was a legal and bureaucratic battle that dragged on for years. Even so, the legacy of the Concert for Bangladesh ultimately proved greater than its immediate problems. It directly inspired future benefit concerts such as Live Aid and established a model that had not previously existed. Musicians using their visibility to place a humanitarian crisis at the center of the global conversation. Overnight, millions of people learned where Bangladesh was and what was happening there, something neither governments nor international organizations had managed to achieve until then. With time, the balance became clearer and more bitter. The concert was an artistic, cultural, and symbolic success. It permanently changed the relationship between music and activism, but it also revealed an uncomfortable truth. Doing the right thing does not guarantee a happy ending. The Concert for Bangladesh proved that music could move consciences, and also that the real world is not always designed to absorb that momentum without resistance. The Concert for Bangladesh was not a happy ending. It was a turning point. It showed that music could make an ignored tragedy visible and mobilize millions of people in a matter of days. It also made clear that goodwill alone is not enough when it collides with political, legal, and economic systems built without urgency in mind. George Harrison did not change the world in a single afternoon, but he permanently altered the way the world would come to expect artists to respond to it. Perhaps that is why its legacy remains as unsettling as it is inspiring. The Concert for Bangladesh was epic, chaotic, imperfect, and profoundly human. It did not end a war or erase suffering, but it opened a door that never fully closed again. From that moment on, every time music has tried to do more than entertain, it has done so by walking the path Harrison traced in 1971, accepting, consciously or not, that even the noblest gestures come at a cost. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. I'm Blake Korick, and this is Music Box.
The most memorable thing really was the fact that it actually worked.